I'm Betty. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to share with you my recipe for spaghetti and meatballs. When I first met my husband, believe it or not, I had never eaten pasta in any form. My family is Scottish and we ate meat and potatoes. So it was a revelation when I was introduced to this new cuisine. This is the original recipe as I wrote it down when my mother-in-law first taught it to me, more than 53 years ago. So here are my ingredients. I have 1.25 pounds of beef, pork, and veal. You may find it packaged as meatloaf mix. If your grocery store doesn't have this, just ask the butcher for essentially equal proportions of beef, pork, and veal. I've got 2 peeled garlic cloves. I have a cup of Italian flavored breadcrumbs, about a 1/2 cup of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, about a 1/2 cup of freshly chopped parsley, and I've got 4 eggs here, which I've beaten slightly. And all I'm going to do is mix these together. I'll break up the meat a little bit first. And then add my eggs. And I'm just going to add in the other ingredients. The parsley and the cheese. Give that a little mix. You don't want to mash this. Just keep tossing it. It'll break up as you go. Now I'm going to grate in the garlic. I like to grate this because no one really wants to get a big lump of garlic in the middle of a meatball. So we'll just grate these quickly. Also, this is faster than chopping, and it's easier to clean than using a garlic press. Just make sure I get all of that. Now I'll add my breadcrumbs. Now that I've mixed all the ingredients for the meatballs, I'll start forming them. And to do that, I'll constantly be rinsing my hands under cold water. By doing that, the mixture won't stick to my hands. Now when you form these, you roll them lightly. You don't compress them. A little more for that one. And this is the size I like to use. You can also make these very tiny to use as a cocktail hors d'oeuvre. And if you do that, instead of frying them in a pan, you simply put them on a baking sheet and bake them in the oven at about 375 for about 10-15 minutes until they're brown. I've finished forming the meatballs, and as you can see, I've got 21 of them here. Obviously, the number is going to vary by the size you make them. But we're ready to start putting together our sauce. In addition to the meatballs, I'm going to add some sweet Italian sausage to my sauce. Of course, you may use the hot variety if you prefer. And something you may never heard of, some hard-boiled eggs, which are my husband's absolute favorite. The Italians who came to this country were generally poor. And protein, of course, is very expensive. And the least expensive protein you can buy, generally, are eggs. And so these became part of the cuisine. I've preheated my pot. A trick to frying is to have your fry pan hot, or whichever pot you're using, and then add your oil. That way your food won't stick. I don't care to use a non-stick pan for this. And now I'm going to start adding the meatballs. And you can hear they sizzle right away. We'll cook about a half dozen at a time. These have started to brown, and I'm going to turn them. And as you can see, they're not sticking at all. My meatballs have browned on all sides, and I'm transferring them to a bowl. It's the same bowl I had mixed them in, which I've washed, because you never transfer cooked meat to a container that has held raw meat. And you can see in the pan, nothing is sticking. And I'll continue frying the rest. I've finished browning the meatballs and the sausage, and now I'm going to brown the eggs a little bit. Just plop them in the oil. And with my tongs, I'm going to keep them turning. They do tend to stick, so you have to turn them often. I don't know what chemically takes place in this process, but when the eggs are finished, and they'll cook again in the sauce, they take on the most delicious, nutty flavor. They're really a real treat, and I urge you to try them. I'm going to add my onions. I've got about 2 cups of chopped onions. I used 1 large and 1 medium onion. Give that a stir. And we're just going to let those soften. They don't need to brown. My onion has just about softened, and now I'm going to add my garlic. And as before, I'm going to grate it in. I'm going to use about the equivalent of 3 plump cloves of garlic. My onions have softened and my garlic has cooked for a minute or so, and it's very fragrant. And now I'm going to add 8 cans of crushed tomato. When I'm making this sauce, I make a large batch because it freezes really well. And it's a great thing to have on hand for unexpected company. I've added all of my tomatoes, and what I did, took all of the cans and rinsed them out a little bit and accumulated the water because I'm going to add this to my sauce. And there's no use leaving tomatoes in the can. So we'll give this a stir. And I'm going to add 1.5 tablespoons of dried basil, which I'm going to crush a little bit in my hands to release the oil. About the same amount of oregano. 1/2 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. And 2 bay leaves. Just give this a stir. And I'm going to bring this to a boil and add back in all my browned meats. My sauce has just come to a boil, so I'm going to return all of these browned meats back into the pot. All right, I've added all of the meats back in. I'm going to give this a stir. And now I'm going to use a little gadget called a flame tamer. I'm going to put this right on the burner and put my pot back on top, because what this will do is prevent the sauce from sticking on the bottom. This is going to cook for the next 4 to 5 hours. It used to be called Sunday sauce or Sunday gravy, because women would put this together in the morning before they left for church and let it cook happily on the stove until they were ready for dinner later in the afternoon. So we'll see it again a little later, although I will give it an occasional stir while it's cooking. Our sauce has simmered for about 5 hours now. It has reached the desired consistency, and you can really tell when it's done. As you can see over in this corner, the oil has started to separate, and that's a good indicator that your sauce is done. I'll give it a final little stir here. Nothing is sticking to the bottom, and you can see it's a nice consistency. You can serve this with any kind of pasta, obviously, and watch for a future video when I'll show you how to make my favorite lasagna. Enjoy.